Some nuclear weapons weren't just terrifying, they were mistakes. Designed with ambition, built in secret, and sometimes detonated with catastrophic results. These weapons were so flawed, dangerous, or insane that even their creators backed away. These are the stories of the nuclear weapons that failed, not because they lacked power, because they were too powerful, too unpredictable, or too absurd to survive. MK-214 hydrogen bomb. In 1954, the U.S. tested its first dry-fuel hydrogen bomb, the MK-14. It's part of Operation Castle Bravo. But something went wrong. Terribly wrong. Scientists had misjudged the reaction of lithium-7 in the bomb's fuel. Instead of a predicted 6 megatons, Castle Bravo yielded 15 megatons, over twice the expected power. The explosion vaporized the test island and unleashed a deadly cloud of radioactive fallout that poisoned nearby atolls and even a Japanese fishing boat. It was the most powerful U.S. nuclear test and an international scandal. The MK-14 worked too well. The design was deemed too unpredictable. Its chain reaction, miscalculation, made it one of the most catastrophic successes in nuclear history. Davy Crockett. During the Cold War, the U.S. military had a truly wild idea: give soldiers a portable nuclear bomb. The result is the Davy Crockett, a recoilless rifle that could launch a nuclear warhead weighing 51 pounds with a blast radius larger than the weapon's firing range. Deployed in West Germany in the 1960s, it could theoretically stop Soviet tanks, but in reality, it was suicidal. Troops firing the Davy Crockett would be within the lethal range of its own radiation. It was also wildly inaccurate, and deploying it risked escalating every battle into World War III. The weapon wasn't just impractical, it was nearly insane. It was decommissioned quietly, and no one missed it. Tsar Bomba, the Soviet Union's Tsar Bomba, remains the largest nuclear device ever detonated, a 100 megaton monster, later scaled down to 50 megatons for testing. In 1961, it was dropped over Novaya Zemlya. The shockwave circled the Earth 3 times. The mushroom cloud rose over 60 kilometers into the sky. But while the explosion was impressive, the bomb itself was a strategic failure. It was too large for any realistic deployment, too heavy for standard bombers, and too powerful to be used without inviting mutual annihilation. Even the Soviet engineers who designed it knew this was propaganda, not weaponry. The Tsar Bomba wasn't a tool of war, it was a symbol of ego. Project Pluto. In the 1950s, American scientists imagined a cruise missile that would never run out of fuel. Project Pluto aimed to create a nuclear-powered ramjet missile, codenamed SLAM, that could fly at Mach 3 at treetop level, dropping hydrogen bombs as it flew, and irradiating everything beneath it with its unshielded reactor. The missile would roam like a flying Chernobyl, crashing into targets only after poisoning everything in its path. But Pluto was too terrifying to test. The reactor worked in principle, but the environmental consequences of even testing the missile were horrifying. By the 1960s, with ICBMs rising, Project Pluto was cancelled. It was the most dangerous missile that never flew. Su-1000. In the Cold War arms race, the Soviet Union wanted a weapon that would leave no survivors, even beneath the sea. The result was the Su-1000, a prototype of a nuclear-armed megatorpedo, designed to be launched from coastal bases or submarines. It carried a warhead so large it could trigger underwater tsunamis and destroy entire ports in a single strike. But there was a problem, or many. It was too loud, too slow, and too radioactive to be safely deployed, and it risked vaporizing the very submarine that fired it. The design was eventually abandoned, though its ghost lives on in rumors about Russia's modern Poseidon nuclear torpedo. The Su-1000 wasn't a torpedo, it was a suicide note. The neutron bomb. Imagine a nuclear bomb designed to preserve buildings but eliminate life. That was the neutron bomb. Developed in the 1970s, this enhanced radiation weapon produced an intense burst of lethal neutrons, while minimizing blast damage. Military strategists saw it as a battlefield tool, ideal for stopping armored divisions without destroying infrastructure. But the public called it what it was: inhumane. A weapon that left cities standing and corpses intact. The backlash was swift. Allies protested. Moral debates erupted. Production began, then paused. Some were built, but never deployed. The neutron bomb didn't fail technically. It failed ethically. Nuclear landmines and suitcase bombs. During the Cold War, both NATO and the Warsaw Pact designed portable nuclear weapons, backpack bombs, suitcase nukes, even underground atomic landmines. The idea was to slow enemy tanks by leaving irradiated death zones. One plan, Blue Peacock, even proposed heating a buried nuke with live chickens to keep the electronics warm in winter. But the risks were outrageous. Soldiers would be forced to stay near live nukes. Some designs lacked safety protocols. Others couldn't be tracked. In the end, the threat of them falling into enemy hands or being accidentally detonated led most countries to quietly dismantle them. The world flirted with pocket-sized Armageddon, then thought better of it. Project Orion. In the late 1950s, U.S. scientists proposed something as bold as it was insane, launching a spaceship into orbit by detonating a series of nuclear bombs beneath it. Known as Project Orion, this design would use pulsed nuclear propulsion, which blasts pushing the ship forward on a giant shock-absorbing plate. It could theoretically send hundreds of tons to Mars, Jupiter, or beyond. But there was one glaring problem. Detonating nuclear weapons in Earth's atmosphere violated treaties, ethics, and common sense. The fallout would have been catastrophic. Orion was canceled by the early 1960s. It remains the most spectacular failed attempt to weaponize space travel, not with rockets, but with nuclear fire. Operation Teapot met. In 1955, during Operation Teapot, the U.S. tested a new type of nuclear device called the MET, short for Military Effects Test. The idea was to measure how soldiers, bunkers, and gear would perform in a nuclear battlefield. But the test yielded far more radiation than expected, over 33 times more neutron output than predicted, and troops were stationed nearby. Planners had modified the bomb's core without rechecking its neutron yield. The result? Widespread contamination and radiation exposure to American soldiers and test observers. The MET shot wasn't just a failed test, it was a near-criminal miscalculation, a Soviet dead hand. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union built a system codenamed Perimeter, but known in the West as Dead Hand, a nuclear command and control system designed to automatically launch retaliation strikes, even if all leadership was wiped out. It used seismic, light, and radiation sensors to detect nuclear explosions. If the Kremlin didn't respond in time, the machine would, but there were terrifying flaws. What if the system glitched? What if a false alarm triggered World War III? To this day, parts of the system may still be active, shrouded in secrecy. It was a system built on fear, not strategy. A computer designed to end the world, whether we asked it to or not. Tactical nuclear artillery. Both the US and Soviet Union developed tactical nuclear artillery shells, small nukes, fired from cannons. The most famous? The W-48 and W-33, nuclear rounds that could be fired from standard field guns. In theory, these would stop enemy troops or tanks in open battle. In reality, they were a disaster waiting to happen. Their blast radius often exceeded the range of the cannon, meaning soldiers could be vaporized by their own weapon. Field commanders hesitated to use them for fear of escalation. Over time, they were quietly retired. Tactical nukes were simply too dangerous and too insane for the battlefield. Blue Peacock, perhaps the strangest of them all. The UK's Blue Peacock project. During the Cold War, British planners designed a nuclear landmine to be buried in West Germany, detonated remotely to stop Soviet advances. But there was a problem. In winter, the electronics might freeze. The solution? Live chickens sealed inside the bomb, meant to keep it warm with body heat. The plan was real, declassified in 2004. But logistical nightmares, ethical concerns, and sheer absurdity led to the Project's cancellation in 1958. Blue Peacock was just a failed weapon. It was proof that, sometimes even the nuclear age has a sense of dark comedy. South Africa's nuclear bomb. In the 1970s and 80s, a apartheid era, South Africa secretly built 6 nuclear weapons, and possibly tested one in the 1979 Vila incident. Mysterious double flash in the South Atlantic. But as the Cold War cooled and apartheid crumbled, the regime feared handing nuclear weapons to a future black-led government. So, in a move unmatched in history, South Africa voluntarily dismantled its arsenal. The bombs were disassembled, the blueprints destroyed, and the enriched uranium locked away. The weapons worked, but the program failed its ultimate purpose: long-term deterrence. South Africa became the first country to build nukes, and then give them up. Jericho 2 missile. Israel has never officially confirmed its nuclear arsenal, but all evidence points to one. In the 1980s and 90s, Israel developed the Jericho 2 missile, intended to carry a nuclear payload. But early tests were plagued with failures, misfires, and inaccuracy. Several launches had to be aborted mid-air. Though the missile was eventually deployed in small numbers, the shaky development and poor performance led to it being phased out in favor of better technology. Israel's nukes may exist, but Jericho 2 wasn't the sword they hoped to wield. Nuclear bazooka concepts. At the height of Cold War paranoia, military designers flirted with the idea of one-man portable nukes. Basically, nuclear bazookas. These were ultra-small devices imagined for sabotage missions or last-resort anti-tank weapons. Concepts like the U.S. SOD involved paratroopers skiing into enemy territory with a nuke in a backpack and potentially dying with it. But the reality was grim. The weapons were wildly inaccurate, offered no real escape time, and posed as much risk to the operator as to the target. These ideas were quietly scrapped. Even nuclear war planners knew some ideas are just too suicidal. Bitfield and Black projects across the US, Russia, and beyond. Classified projects, often referred to as Bitfield programs, aimed to create ultra-specialized nuclear devices, radiation-only warheads, planet-penetrating bunker busters, even nuclear-powered lasers. Billions were funneled into labs with no public oversight. Most of these projects failed in silence, canceled due to technical failure, shifting priorities, or treaties. Their names were lost, their files redacted. All that remains are whispers and declassified reports, ideas that sounded futuristic, but were too unstable to ever see a launch pad.